If you want a game that's set in a Japanese high school with a silent protagonist, who's popular with the ladies,
Hey you, quit staring at me like that. You're making me blush. You are my type, after all.
What? You messing around behind her back? Well, player's gonna play.
and with another mascot that pretty much all JRPGs have these days.
Would calling the other world strike you with fear? If not, you can do so whenever I'm near.
Then you might like Monark. This game was developed by indie studio Lancrasse and publisher Furyu, and I had high hopes for this game because it had this really cool horror JRPG atmosphere. I was thinking, you know what? This game could be the next sleeper hit. And if Monark takes off as the next JRPG, I was there. Now the reason there is so much hype for this game is that it was headed by some former Shin Megami Tensei developers. So I'm thinking this is gonna be great. So when teasers first came out about this game and they saw this cool horror JRPG atmosphere, a lot of JRPG fans, including myself, were very excited to check out Monark when it came out. But when I soon started playing the game, my hopes were dashed. And not because it was a horrible game. Monark is not a horrible game. In fact, it has a lot of good ideas, even some great ones. But for every good idea, or sometimes even great idea, there was at least 2 flaws that would pop up. If I had to describe Monark, I would say it's pretty enjoyable at certain parts, but it's just misses the mark a lot. I would call it an okay-ish game. I will go over the good as well as the bad in this game. And hey, maybe the bad in this game you can tolerate. Maybe you'll actually enjoy Monark more than I did. Who knows? So with that being said, what is Monark all about?
The story starts off at a high school called Shin Megami Academy. Our silent protagonist wakes up with no recollection of his memories. The protagonist quickly realizes that his school is in danger. The academy is engulfed in a magical barrier that prevents anyone from leaving the campus. And there's this deadly mist that's seeped into each building, where students and faculty exposed to it have been going insane, with some even committing murder around the campus. The game immediately starts off with this gloomy, dark horror theme with haunting music in the background. You're first introduced to a variety of students, including the goody two-shoes school president, your younger sister that's low-key jealous of all the other females you meet, the quirky, clumsy, mid-30-year-old doctor, the stern school dean, and the mascot of the game, Vanitas, who often speaks in rhyme. Early on, your sister goes near the deadly mist and gets a strange phone call and answers it, pulling your entire party into this alternate world called the Otherworld, where demons reside. You're wondering how you and your party just got pulled into this other world when some strange skeleton demons are about to attack you and your newfound friends. Vanitas steps in and asks you to make a pact with him, as he's a powerful entity called a monarch, saying that if you make this pact, you'll become a chosen pact bearer, a person that has special powers called authority, to fight the demons, with Vanitas becoming your alter ego, or the protagonist's monarch. If you played a Persona game before, it's quite similar, with how these characters make a pact with their alter egos, awaken to their personas within, and gain special powers to fight demons. Of course, the protagonist says yes to Vanitas' offer, as he really doesn't have a choice. He turns into the pact bearer of Vanity and defeats the tutorial level demons. After that, the party goes back to the real world, and they form a club called the True Student Council.
How about the True Student Council?
Or the TSC for short. The protagonist is quickly named vice president of this new club, and from then on, you'll pretty much hear everyone in the game refer to the protagonist as vice president or Mr. VP. And then when the school dean Sora meets up with the TSC, she gives him the task to clear the mist from each building on the school campus, which begins the game's main story. During the game, you'll get used to this pattern. You'll meet up in the True Student Council room, which is basically your HQ. You'll go to a new building filled with mist. You'll talk to the students and facility in that new building. Then you'll go into the mist to find cell phones to connect to the other world to clear out the demons. Then you'll fight the evil pact bearer of that building and shatter their ideals to restore normalcy and rid the building of the mist. And while yes, it's a simple formula, and all JRPGs have this, Monarch's formula could be vastly improved. More on this later. For the game's battle system, it's done on a gridless map, where you and your party consist of one other human companion and the rest demons. In the earlier battles, the maps are quite small, yet the battles will still take about 30 minutes on average, since moving and positioning takes up a bit of time. The battles revolve around 2 meters, the first being the Mad or Madness meter, which is basically your sanity. Madness is used for your powerful authority attacks, yet if your madness reaches 100%, your character goes crazy as you'll lose control of that character. Yeah, they'll become a lot more powerful during that time, yet they will die after 3 turns. Obviously, you don't want this to happen, so there's this balance between using your powerful authority attacks and balancing your madness, so your characters don't go insane. The second main stat is called Awakening, which basically increases with the more damage you take. Get the Awakening stat to 100%, and you can use any authority attacks without using any madness. The state is called Being Awakened, and it's really useful in spamming those powerful authority moves without going insane. Then you get the golden state of being enlightened, where your madness and awakening meters are both 100%. Your character becomes very powerful for a short time, but unlike going mad, you don't lose control, nor do you die after 3 turns. Yet as cool as being enlightened is, this rarely happens, as I only had this happen twice in my playthrough. Outside of battles, you'll visit the various buildings on campus, talk to students and faculty, and read school notes scattered around. Now a tricky part in this game is that the spirit points are also the money in this game, so you have to balance these points between buying items and leveling your characters. Moving on to the game's themes, 2 major ones are the 7 deadly sins and a pack bearer's strong ego. Since the protagonist is a pack bearer, his ego stats is defined by the 7 deadly sins. Monark does a good job of making these stats impactful in the beginning. One thing I did like about this game is that you take a personality test in the beginning of the game, where the answers will determine your 7 stats. But that's not all, because this test also affects who will be your first demon starting out the game. This game has 4 demons, but the order that you get them in depends on what you answer on the test, and this is especially important in your first demon. So for instance, if you answer the test a certain way, you might get the demon that's really strong in fighting, the warrior demon. But another player might have different test results, and they may get instead a demon that's good at ranged attacks, the archer demon. This is a cool feature, since just from this personality test alone, everyone's playthrough will be a bit different, since your battles will be dictated based on your starting demon.
So there's a couple things I had a blast playing with this game. Let me tell you, the battles are really fun. They're probably the most enjoyable part in this game. Now I played this game on hard difficulty because I wanted a challenge. Man, some of those enemies hit like a truck, and they have a lot of HP as well. But that's the way I like it, hard and restarting a lot. And one thing that Monark does have that some players might not like is that there's a major spike in enemy levels after each section. So when you go into a new section, they might be 7 or 8 levels ahead of you, and you might just get mauled. I tried to play this game straight and without really much grinding, and I got wiped. So basically, I had to grind just to keep up with the normal enemies.
I liked how the battles rewarded positioning, where hitting enemies in the back, for example, greatly increases your hit percentage, and then if you attack a target with other allies nearby, they'll all assist attack as well. And some of the maps get creative later in the game, where there's teleporters and traps such as charm and poison generators, where if you get too close, you'll get hit with that status effect. So the battles really reward you from positioning your characters just outside these generators, while trying to lure in the enemy at the same time. Then, when you're fighting the big boss for each building, the evil pack bearers, you'll get treated to some serious bangers, like this one. Each boss has their own unique bangers, and these songs alone are a big reason why I continued to play this game. The boss battles are also intense, as in many of them I would barely win, giving a sense of thrill when you finally take down an evil pack bearer. There's also a lot of depth with the character leveling and skill development. The skills that each character can get are fun to customize, as there's a wide range of skills to level up. You'll find yourself spending countless hours customizing your characters to adapt to different battles, and to fit them into each role better, such as making one character a warrior type, or another maybe a paladin type. The character's small talk and conversations with one another are also well done.
I would like some yakisoba bread.
Oh, store's closed. And I'm not your personal assistant.
It's a nice touch, and it shows their personalities. Staying on the theme of conversations, the dialogue choices that the protagonist can make is another good feature. Usually in JRPGs that have dialogue choices, it doesn't really matter what you choose, since the answers will be very similar regardless of your choice. But here, if you choose a dialogue option, the other character will actually respond to you in both voice and show their reaction to your answer, giving your choice a lot more weight. As for the voice acting in this game, at least in Japanese, it's quite good. I played parts of the game in Japanese before making the switch to English, and wow, The quality between the two is like night and day. The English voice acting is a lot of hit and miss, with some characters just having bad voices, while others fitting their role quite well. But despite that, I am impressed that pretty much the entire game is voice acted, with just minor NPCs having text-only dialogue, and that's quite impressive, especially from indie studio Lancrasse to have so many voice actors. And the amount of voice acting in this game, despite what I said earlier about the English voice acting, immerses the player in its story. And lastly, I also digged the game's horror theme. You rarely see this in JRPGs, so I like the direction where Monark was going. The game thrusts you in immediately in that horror setting and also wastes no time with fluff or some 3-hour setup before the actual story. It's these positives that made the game, at times, a blast to play, and these pros of the game made me want to like this game so much more.
Whew, now we're at the negatives, and there are plenty, unfortunately. Like I said earlier, maybe these negatives aren't turnoffs for you. Maybe they're just for me. I don't know. But there were plenty of them, and I couldn't stop noticing them when I was playing. I felt like the biggest sin in this game was its repetition. This game is very repetitive. It doesn't really have much change. There's really little mechanics that are introduced in the game after the first couple hours, and it feels you're just really going through the same routines over and over again. Because the game really breaks down into this: going to new building, climb up to the top floor of said building, fight evil pack bear that's cursing the said building, shatter their ideal or ambitions, and pretty much repeat throughout the entire game. The game really didn't change much at all, and it just made the game a slog after a while.
Now, this tedious loop wouldn't have been so bad if the other parts of the game were strong, such as the main characters, but that's not the case. The main cast are pretty much bland, and they follow typical anime cliches, such as the aforementioned goody two-shoes school president, the joker that skips school, the kid that feels abandoned, and so on. Now, if these traits were just initial cliches and went past these cliches as the story went on, then all's forgiven. Many great JRPGs do this. But sadly, these characters in Monark never get past their stereotypical personalities. A lot of them don't have any depth at all. These characters are pretty much what you get throughout the entire game, as there's little to no growth in these characters. And because the characters don't have good backstories, it's a lot harder to care about them in the game. And in fact, I would say that the only thing that gives these characters a bit more personality is the small talk and how they interact with each other randomly. So at least we got that. The horror theme is something that could have been done a lot better, and while I mentioned a bit earlier that it was a positive and a definite plus, the way they handled the madness meter could have been a bit better, because the madness meter only matters in battle, because outside of battle, you can gain madness when you're in the mist. Now alone, this is a good feature, since it's simulating that you're slowly going insane, but when your madness gets to 100% in the mist, you just get teleported outside to the school's infirmary, and that's it. No death, no game over, no brutal death, nothing. I think Monark missed a good opportunity to make this mist an even more impactful, scarier part of the game. I never once felt threatened or scared by the mist, because there was no stakes involved. Even if the madness meter reached 100%, nothing would really happen. I can just go back into that building right away. Monark also misses a good opportunity to make the NPCs a much bigger part of the game. You'll meet over 100 students in the game with interesting backgrounds when you read their student profiles, but nothing is done further to have them involved as side characters. I really wanted them to have a more fleshed out backstory and to see them interact with the main cast and have vested interest in them and their backstory. But other than talking to them to get a new student profile, the students are just there. And since we're still talking about the characters and how they interact with one another, Monark did itself a big disservice by only having one human character travel with you at a time. You'll never get to see the party interacting with the students just because you only can bring one human character. The game's graphics aren't the best either, as the game looks a bit outdated. While I didn't personally mind these graphics, I know that for some, not having solid graphics, or at least better graphics, may be off-putting for some JRPGers. Jogging around in this game is also quite slow, and I say jogging because that's the fastest you can move in this game. There's no actual run movement, so moving around takes a lot more time than it should. Fast travel is also badly implemented in this game. Sure, you can fast travel to other building locations, but you can only go to the first floor of any building or the current mist area. So if you wanted to go to, say, the 3rd floor in a building, you'd have to fast travel to the 1st floor first, then climb up 2 sets of stairs to the 3rd floor. Why couldn't each floor in the building be accessible through fast travel? I don't know. Moving on to the game's main currency, Spirit is another problem. A big reason is that you use Spirit for both leveling characters and buying items. Pretty much every JRPG, as mentioned earlier, has experience points for leveling characters, and then gold for buying items. Having just one currency in this game is a huge problem because you're forced to split your spirit to power up your characters or buy items. And to get enough spirit to do both, you'll need to grind a lot. Speaking of grinding, Monark is a huge grind fest. For one, there's huge level spikes between each new building, where the enemies will be a lot higher level than you. Simply fighting the normal amount of enemies in this game won't cut it. I spent around 70 hours to get the true ending, and half that time was grinding, so I can fight the new enemies I encountered. And while we're still on battles, the enemy variety in this game is pretty non-existent. I hope you like skeletons, because that's all you're gonna see in this game. In fact, outside the bosses, there's only 3 types of enemies, and they're all skeleton demons. There's the skeleton with a sword, one with a crossbow, and one with a halberd. And that's it. I'm not kidding. I think the battle designers basically just mailed it in with the monster design, because having only 3 variety of enemies adds to the redundancy of this game. Moving on to Monarch's story, it's quite underwhelming. The writing simply isn't that good. While the story does start off strong, it just lulls itself into redundancy for the next 20 or so hours, and only when you hit about the 25 to 30 hour mark does the story get a bit more interesting. They reveal the twist, but by that time, you're most likely checked out of the story. It gets even worse if you want to get the true ending, as you'll be replaying the same areas 4 times, making the true ending a slog to get. And staying on with the topic of the true ending, if you want to get it, you have to be at near max level, and it's going to even add to more grinding. Now the puzzles in Monarch are challenging and fair, at least in the beginning. The game would give you ample clues for these puzzles, where you'd have to look up info in student profiles and documents, and sometimes enter a password on a computer. But then towards the middle of the game, the puzzles started getting a bit crazier, as many puzzles would just give you 1 or 2 sentences to solve them. And these puzzles got so difficult that I would overthink these puzzles constantly, and spend hours on these puzzles. I honestly don't blame people if they look up a game guide to look up these puzzle answers. That's how crazy some of these puzzles get towards the end of the game. And what even makes this more frustrating is there's no highlighted words in the clues. The puzzles I once found fun and challenging in the beginning of the game became more of a chore.
While the game didn't live up to the initial hype, there is still plenty of good news to be had. The game overall isn't that bad, and I know there was some reviewers that just hated it and trashed on the game. It's not that terrible. I would say at most, it's an average JRPG, but I feel if the developers can look at all the shortcomings that this game had and just massively improve on it on their next JRPG, if they make one, I think that game will be a winner. So that's why, even though this game was so-so, I'm gonna look forward to the developers' next game.